started sledding with my shoes. And then I said, no, this is not the way I wanted to sled. And the kids, they was out with us because they wanted it to be something wonderful, and they made the most of it. They didn't care. And so I said, look, you just go on down there and feed them sheep because they have a tendency to run up under you anyway. And I thought, I'm not going to do that because I didn't want to enjoy it so much that I would be maybe in some hospital or something. So I held on to the fence and let them do it. But I did want it to. And it was amazing how certain places, especially if, like where the water ran down, and it kind of froze over for just a little while till the sun hit it yesterday morning. We had a little bit to slide on. And it was amazing. Maddox, he's a detail person, and we was riding between one barn to the other over in the other part of the pasture, and he said, look at those icicles. And on one part of the fence, they was going up instead of down. It was something, and I hadn't even noticed it, but he did. So it was pretty, wasn't it, to look at the sun coming through the ice on the trees. We enjoyed that. Today, we're talking about the Lord is majestic, and we think about how pretty the coating of the ice was on the trees, and we are thankful that it wasn't enough to break all the trees or any of that. So, God knows what we need. But that majesty, you think about that and the beauty. And our book, though, is talking about the units Our God Reigns. And it says, what images do you associate with the highest government authorities? For people in the United States, the White House, Capitol Hill, or even the Constitution might be the most powerful images. We think about that. But as I was studying this, I thought, we don't hold that with the way things have been and just so crazy, and you don't know who to trust and who not to trust. It's sort of sad that we don't hold any of that with any, or where you say, let's take it with a grain of salt or something. We don't hold it in majesty or in power like we used to, but hopefully we would come back to that. But it was talking about, where they had a king, a country with a king or a queen or whatever like that. But it says the world of the Bible has its own symbols of power and authority. Kings wore colorful robes and golden crowns. They even built public monuments and enormous palaces to honor themselves and celebrate their accomplishments. And I know if you've ever looked at many fancy buildings or anything like that. One summer we were blessed to get to go visit. Doug has a cousin that lives in Austria in the summer. Her husband was from Austria, and we went to visit them. It's been before McAllister was born, so it's been a good while. But they had all these places and the churches and all, were gilded in gold and all this stuff, how they spent money. And she kept saying, well, they just wasted money on all this when they could have been putting it on some of the people or whatever. But that's an example, like this is, of the public monuments and enormous palaces and things that they did to honor themselves. It says human authorities, even good leaders, fall short of perfection. They fail, often spectacularly. Those called to protect can cause harm. In times of crisis, the symbols of authority can evoke fear and anger instead of respect and confidence. And I think that's kind of what we feel at times. It says, then and now, the world longs for a new kind of authority, a different king. And we do long for our king, but we have him. We trust God. We know he's with us every day, and this is where he wants us to be right now. And when he's ready for it to be where he's reigning on his throne and we're all together worshiping him, that's when that'll be. But right now, this psalm that we're going to look at today celebrates the king that that we're seeking and that they were seeking. It says, how do you describe things that we've never experienced? Have you ever been on a trip or something and if you try to tell somebody what it was like, what you visited and all, and they can't think about it because they didn't go with you. That's why it's really kind of fun if you're going to go on a trip, take somebody with you, somebody else, so that you say, well, you remember when we saw that, because it's just hard to describe. But a lot of times, especially with children, and Miller's in that stage now where he asks why all the time. And he asks us, and how, all about every single thing we say, even if we say, we're going to go outside now, why? You know, it's just that way. And do you find yourselves, those of you who are with children much, just grasping through our brains to try to get an explanation, but none of them really work. The very next question, they're going to say it again. You know, so you just ask how and why, but it's hard to describe things to people if they've never experienced it either. And that's just like, it says, we can compare God's glory and might to the glorious and powerful things we've experienced, knowing he surpasses all of this. So the best thing that ever happened to you, or the thing that you enjoyed the most, God's even better. You know, it talks about this psalm, uses two literary devices extensively, and one's personification. And, you know, back when you were in school, or, you know, maybe even since school, where you try to give personal characteristics to an object that's not a person or a thing, you know, just like, I think about, like Hickory Dickory Dock and the mouse ran up the clock, and you see the clock smiling or something, you know, but we know it's not a person, but it's personified in that. But it's talking about that they did this because God, in this psalm, God is an impersonal power, but because he can't be confined to human characteristics. But, you know, like if you were blessed like I was to grow up with a loving, caring father or mother, and you think, well, if he was that good to me, how much even better is God? You know, and especially if they taught you that God was good, you know, and you think about those characteristics, and we can say, you know, even though God is not man, and it's just like how the preacher brought up 2 or 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, that Jesus had to be born in the flesh so that we could accept, you know, that he went through what we went through. He had to go that way, you know, for him to be a man in flesh, just like we are, for him to die for us, and us to, you know, for him to become a person. It says, John's gospel reminds us that Jesus Christ, the divine incarnate Son of God, revealed God through his real, tangible presence in the world. So it was real. It wasn't just something they were talking about. In Jesus, the Creator God has become not just near to us, but one of us. You know, it's something like, you know, when you have a leader, and we've had leaders or preachers, I'll say it that way, in our church before who was here with us, but they wasn't really like with us. You know what I mean? I mean, like, you know, they came in the church and went out of the church, and they were here on Sunday and all that. But to feel like it's a part, just like how you want to feel a part of a group of people, a lot of times, God made it so that we could feel that he really was with us. You know, you know that yourself in just groups of people that you deal with every day. You might hear somebody say, well, they just don't get us, you know, and of course, like us, I mean, I'm talking about us right now, so we're something to take in, you know, for sure, but, you know, we all get each other, and we, you know, it's so helpful when you have somebody teaching and preaching and telling you things, because you think, yeah, they know how we feel, because they just one of us, that kind of thing. So it's important, but the important thing was with Jesus coming so that he could literally be one of us. It says another device they use in the Psalms is parallelism, and it's where they repeat something over and over, and we're going to see this just so, you know, you can really drill it in. I think about trying to teach in school, and for me, for the program that I worked with, we did need to repeat things over and over and over every day, you know, and it's become helpful to me now that I forget stuff. I do it to myself, you know, but to repeat it and maybe say it another way, but use some of the same words. You just try to find all kinds of different ways to talk about the same thing so that it can just drive it home, because one of those things will be the one that, you know, what Paul falls in for might be different than what Daniel does or whatever, or maybe Joanne sees it a different way, you know, than Tom. But once we all get it, then, you know, that's why you do these things and try to change up the words. But it says the Hebrew poetry was beautiful, and it was so different from our own, but yet so powerful. It says the Psalms were written from personal experience, whether it was praise, lament, or whatever, and it was also the hymn book of ancient Israel, and we could compare our own singing of hymns to be powerful, but the experience we bring to our singing is what ultimately gives the song meaning. You know, sometimes there'd be a song sung during a certain worship service that you was in, and you felt God in a special way, and then you every time you hear that song again, you kind of get that feeling. Or, you know, it's just like if you was thinking about, I'll say for me, and Doug, back in 1975, when this one song played, and we hear it again now, it just takes you back, you know, to what you did, what you was doing, or whatever. And the songs do that for us, and the Psalms were the same. It says Psalm 93, some of them had this superscription, but this one didn't have it, but it was in a collection of kingship psalms, they said. And the kingship psalms celebrated the king, whoever the king was at that time, or it might be the Lord as king that they were celebrating. But it says there was some question about this one that we're going to talk about today, that it might have been when they were kind of celebrating a new king coming in, or a renewal of the reign. Like, you know, like if we did, like every year, and like, you know, the president does like the State of the Union or whatever address, but, you know, like if every year past inauguration, if you celebrate it, oh, they're back, it's another year, they'll still be back for 3 more or 2 more, or ever how many more's left. You know, if we celebrated that, they did that. They celebrated each new year when they came back in, and they were enthroned. But it says God has no need of such a ceremony to renew his reign, because God has been God forever. I mean, we can't wrap our hands around that, because we know our beginning and our end is just like maybe when we're born, and parents and so many people in the church, if you just think about it, y'all just look around the room, you can see them sitting where they were sitting, you know, and we knew them. They were here when we came, but then we saw their ending, you know, and people will see our endings too. You know, but God didn't have a beginning or an ending. You know, he's just been God all the time. It's hard for us to wrap our minds around things like that, but he has no need of a ceremony to renew his reign, because he's always reigned. So let's look in Psalm 93 in verse 1. It says, the Lord reigns. He is robed in majesty. The Lord is robed in majesty and armed with strength. So, see, he's saying that he reigns, then he says he's robed. In other words, he's clothed in majesty. And then it says he is robed in majesty, and then it says the Lord is robed in majesty. See how they're doing that repeating, like I told you that we would hear in the parallelism. They bring it up again, so they've said it 2 times. And it says, and armed with strength. Now, if we were to describe a king or something, we might say, well, he had on, you know, this robe, and it had gold something on it or whatever, and he was carrying the scepter, and it had, you know, jewels around it. Notice they don't describe the Lord's clothes. They don't say anything about the color, because he's robed in majesty. It's not an outfit like you go pick out, you know, or whatever. And what he's armed with, it's not any kind of weapon that we know about that we might arm ourselves with, but it's strength. And so it's just different how it describes him, this king, compared to a king they might have had then. It says the Lord translates God's proper name, transliterated as Yahweh for English speakers. And it brought up this, it says Moses referred to him as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then it brings up this word. It says the tetragrammaton, which refers to the name Yahweh, is 4 letters, and I'll look that up, and I was going to show it to you on my phone. It's these letters, they start, which I would like, if we're reading, let me turn around so I can do it. So if we was reading the word, there's only 4 letters here. But you know what they do? They start over here in the Hebrew and go that way. And I like that as the left-handed person. I do. Because when I write, I just smear all my letters as I go, you see. And they go this way. See, my it'd be all clean if I could start here and go there. But I looked that up. And if you have time, look up, find that word again, tetragrammaton. Look that up and see how the symbols are. It's interesting. And it tells about it and how it was read right to left. It says the name, it means I am who I am, or I will be what I will be. You know, there's no parameters there. It says this conveys God's reliability to be himself, not fickle or changing as people or pagan gods can be. He's not going to change. He's just who he is. You know, we try to be good people, and we try to be the same. I mean, if you think about it, especially like if you got grandchildren or something and you're caring for them, and you think, now, what are they going to remember about me? You know, how I did this or that or whatever. And we want to be the same, and we want especially to show them Jesus, don't we? But, you know, God knows he's going to be just like he is. We wish we could be that even and that predictable. But, you know, especially if you asked somebody's spouse and they told you the truth, you know, that the person you saw today might not be the one that they saw that evening or whatever. You know, as much as you try to be true and good and pure and follow all these things, we as humans can't do it. But God, there's no danger of him having a different personality. He's always going to be what he is. And in this verse it said, to speak of God's clothing is to personify. So this is the personification we were talking about. So it's talking about him being in clothes, and it gives him human characteristics. But it says, whereas a human king might be clothed in fine linen or royal colors, which, you know, I love the purple. It says God is robed in majesty and strength, is what it says. So it says God's character alone is so wonderful that no further adornment is needed to make it better. You know how we'll say, well, what could I do? Or like you be getting ready sometime, or women do this. I don't think men do it, but they might. And you say, well, which necklace do you think would look best with that? Or do you think I ought to put on a jacket? Or, you know, how's that going to look better? What's going to hide part of the body you don't want to be seen? You know, that kind of thing. But God he's just God. He don't need anything added to him. It says, it talked about a belt being girded around one's waist. And you know, in the Bible all the time they'll say, gird yourself up, you know, or whatever. Well, what it's talking about, and I think it seems like I've had a lesson with this before, but the real reason for that was to hold it in, was not to accentuate their waistline or anything. It was so they could pull the bottom up through their legs into and over that rope, so when they got ready to run, they could run. It says it was a preparation for action, especially in battle, where they said, gird yourself up. So that was how, so that's girding yourself with God's word or whatever. It's like preparing yourself to withstand something you got to face. But can't y'all, in your mind, aren't you just seeing some guy pulling that robe up, or a lady, I guess they could do it too, and get it all fixed so you could take on off. Because if you're, you know how like if you've ever wore like a prom dress or something and you got to pick it up, to go on up the steps, or, heaven forbid it happens to everybody at the wedding, they're going down the aisle and they're stepping on the front of their dress, or, during that first dance or something, it just gets all in the way, so you don't want anything to hinder you, especially if you're in a battle situation. And that's what it was talking about, so that they could gather it up and gird themselves up with this belt. Okay, in 1b it says, indeed, The world is established, firm, and secure. So first he's saying he's robed in majesty, clothed in strength, and the world is established, firm, and secure because God created the world. He created it just like he wanted to. And if you want to know how, then you go back to Genesis and read how did he do that. And you see the steps. And it says the world does not exist on its own, but was created by God. It can only be spoken of as established and immovable because of God's intention for it and his power to accomplish what he wills. It says, should the Lord wish it, all of creation would tremble and fall to pieces. It says, Paul mentioned this in his preaching in Athens and in 2 Peter. And it's just God made the world and it's established. In 2, it says, your throne was established long ago. You are from all eternity. So it's just thinking about different leaders and when they established their throne and when it ended and when their reign began or ended or whatever. We don't have any of that with God. It says in Revelation and in Acts, in several Acts, Isaiah, and Matthew, it says the earth is, heaven is considered God's throne, and the earth is considered his footstool. And it brought up this section from Acts, and if y'all remember when they was wanting to, when Stephen was on trial, Acts chapter 7 is a good book, just go back and read. And I've forgotten, the exact, when I saw Acts 7 and I looked it up, I thought, oh, that's the one where he starts and he just pretty much tells the Bible in a short story. If you ain't got time to read it all, just go read Acts 7. We all need to read it, but I'm just saying it goes piece by piece by piece. And he was telling, because they thought he was going to tear down the temple, and they thought if we can get him for that, that's a crime to be punished with death. So he said, well, this happened, and this happened, this happened. Go read it and see. But we sing this song, and constantly abiding. Y'all remember that song? And it says, it says, while here on his footstool I roam. So we're down here on the footstool, roaming, and we need him to help us, roam in the right way. It says there's never a time, where it says, see the part where it says, you are from all eternity in our verse 2. There's never a time when our everlasting God was not king. There wasn't any start to it, and there won't be any end to it. So it's just hard for us to wrap around that. It brought up in our book about Queen Elizabeth, which for most of us, we knew her our whole life since we've been born, knew that she was the queen. And it says, so, that was a change for them, even though, she wasn't the one all in power. She was the monarch, of course they had their parliament and all that. But, it says it was a comfort and a security to the people, and it was a change to them now that she has passed on and a new leader. But think how long, because, she was so young. It was over 70 years when she took power. In verse 3, it says, the seas have lifted up, Lord. The seas have lifted up their voice. The seas, see how many times they say this over and over. The seas have lifted up their pounding waves. So he's talking about mighty power and how this imagery for them, it was a place where there wasn't a lot of water, a lot of rain or anything. It said it rained very little, and most rain fell between November and March. Very little from June to September, which we can relate to that. But it says, this climate lent itself to I don't know if it's Wadis or Wadis. It didn't pronounce that in our book, and I forgot to look it up. But it's where seasonal creeks that are so dry all of a sudden just flash flood and run out of their boundaries, like I think about it, I don't know why I think about it, but like how sometimes if it rains real fast, real hard and real sudden at Robbins' house down at the basement, that can be a problem. And, it just comes out of that, and then the rest of the time there won't hardly be nothing to worry about. But I think about how the hurricane in the September, how quickly no one expected that, even when they said it was going to rain, that it was going to flood like it did. No one expected that. But that's what it's talking about there. And it says the heaping up of flood imagery emphasizes the ferocity of the water. And we know that can be true, don't we? It says in verse 4, mightier than the thunder of the great waters, mightier than the breakers of the sea, the Lord on high is mighty. So God is mighty. He's to be praised. And we just continue with that. And there's a part in our book that talks about can you hear him? And it says a lot of things in the world demand our attention. And we give it our full attention. You know, if you got your phone, you might have already checked it 5 times while I was talking. You know, and if I was over there, I might have done it. I might have. You know, but with so many things demand our attention. But it says try. It challenged us to try to really be still and try to listen to God every day and see what he has prepared for us. It says, your statutes, Lord, stand firm. So they're always firm. Holiness adorns your house for endless days. You know, like how do you like to go to Olive Garden when you can get all those breadsticks you want? You know, after a while, though, you do get full, but then after a while you think, man, I wish I had another one, you know, or something like that. But think of it truly being endless. He is endless. There's no parameter to him. So it says, for endless days, God's throne is in heaven. So we can appropriately consider that his home, that's his home. And those of us who follow Christ are also now of God's house in a spiritual sense. So it says, as in the conclusion, it says, as we look to God as King, we recognize his powerful authority over all he's created. Think about the animals in the earth, and there was a part back in there I forgot to bring up, but you know how he had the rule that you do this for 7 years and then you'd let it rest? You know, just like how we're supposed to rest on the 7th day, and you'd leave this field, you know, so it could rest and do these things. God cared about everything, not just us. Every little bit of creation he cared about because he made it. It says, we express our wonder at what God has done simply because who he is. We celebrate in song and deed the rightness of being part of God's kingdom. It says, in our prayer, it says, oh Lord Almighty, you are majestic in strength and holiness. Just remember the majestic part. That's what he's clothed in, not this certain color outfit. We are greatly blessed because of your care for us and your creation. We put our trust in you because your reign is sure and your words are true. As we're reminded of your inestimable majesty, we ask you to strengthen and guide us to live under your reign so all may know you as the world's true king. And we talked a lot about this before the election and all that. God is in control no matter what. And as long as we trust in God, we need not fear anything because God will bless us. And the thought to remember is the Lord reigns. Y'all have a good week.